I'm sure you noticed in the reading that in Chapter 7, Frank returns to the idea of a price ceiling and now analyzes that policy through the lens of our consumer surplus and producer surplus that are our new tools to analyze welfare and market-wide welfare. So we're going to leave behind the firm level analysis for this phase of our studies of competitive firms. I have this problem here. It should look familiar. This is the algebraic supply and demand problem we did for the market a couple weeks ago. So now we're going to suppose that city councilors in Beaverton, and I just see I spelled counselor wrong. Should be council, Councillors. Sorry. Anyway, they want to, it's going to bug me. They want to promote physical fitness, and we suppose that they go about it by imposing a $30 per day price ceiling on rental bikes. So they're more affordable, right? The poor people can now more likely rent bikes and get fit. All right, so let's turn to the analysis of that effect of that price ceiling on well-being in this market. I've just sketched out roughly by hand. I've got a much neater answer key in the on the slides from class, but I wanted you to see how this is built from scratch. So I just put up the analysis we did when we saw this last time, which was to identify the competitive market price, and I see I didn't identify quantity, which was 30. All right, I'm going to change pen. Let's make it blue for the short run. We're only going to look at one time period. Now the price ceiling, the $30 per bike rental price ceiling is imposed. So how do we model that? Well, remember from what we did before that we model that as this law that states that bike renters can't charge more than $30. Let's suppose they can enforce that. And even though 35 people would like to rent bikes at that new lower price, only 20 bicycles a day are supplied. And I guess I could have thousands of bikes per day, pretending that Beaverton is bigger than it is, but or is a pleasant place to bike. But I didn't. If you do have thousands, all your consumer surplus, producer surplus findings are going to be in thousands, not just dollars. That's important for the homework. All right, so here's what we're going to do. We could do this algebraically by taking areas of triangles and rectangles, but I'm going to leave you to do that at home. You have to do it for your problem set. But I just want to show you a pretty basic tool of keeping track of welfare effects of policies, which is a lot of what we're going to do together. So let's make a table: consumer surplus, producer surplus. I'm going to leave a row for government revenue, even though we don't need it for this particular problem. And then the total. And then we're going to compare the market case, the competitive market with no price ceiling. We're going to compare that case with the price ceiling case. Then we're going to look at the change. The change, we're going to just, instead of writing out change, I'm using the Greek capital D symbol delta. That's pretty standard to represent discrete change. All right, so now we've got our table. This is new. I don't think Frank does this, but I like this way of conducting welfare analysis, and I think you will find it easier than alternatives. So the next step is to label all areas that are discrete here. Actually, you know what? I'm going to erase that because to do this algebraically, we're going to need one more area. I should say, by we, I mean you. Technically, to solve for unique values of surplus, we have to assume that everybody that values the bike rentals the highest are the ones that get the bike rentals. That isn't true in the real world, but to get a precise value of consumer surplus, producer surplus, etc. Well, it doesn't matter for the producer, but to be able to predict precisely what happens to consumer surplus, we need to impose that assumption. All right, so now I just label every open area. So I'm going to label every open area that I need. If you over-label, as you sometimes do in your beginner, then it doesn't matter. You won't need to refer to the areas that you've labeled that you don't need. All right, so let's analyze. I'll go back to my black pen. And remember that consumer surplus under the market outcome is the area below the demand curve down to the market price in the market outcome. So the area under that demand curve and above that market price, we're just going to refer to as areas A, B, C. Obviously, that's an area of a triangle, dollars per rental times rentals per day. We end up with dollars per day as the units, and you could get a precise value. Actually, it would be 100 minus 40, 60 times 30 times 1/2. That would be 900. So we could put dollars here just by taking the areas, but we're just going to refer to these as by their letter. All right, and then for producer surplus in that market case, it's the area below that $40 price and above the marginal cost curve, the industry marginal cost curve, which is the supply curve. So that's D, E, F, and that's got a height of 30, a width of 30. That's going to have an area of $450 per day. There's no government revenue in the market case, and we would enter a government expenditure as a negative government revenue entry. I'll explain why that is in the next screencast. I'm not done talking, I start writing. All right, the total there for the market case, A, B, C, D, E, F. It's the area under the demand curve and above the marginal cost curve summed over all units sold, the total area. All right, back to a blue pen. Let's analyze the effect of the price ceiling. Well, consumers now get under the price ceiling at $30. They get A, B, D. Producers just get F. There's still no government revenue, and the total surplus is now A, B, D, F. We can tally up who wins, who loses. Consumers come out with a D that they didn't have before, but they lose area C that they did have before. Just comparing the new consumer surplus with the old consumer surplus. Producer surplus, notice that those producers have lost areas D, E. Government didn't gain or lose. And then we can either look at the difference in the total or add up the total of the changes. That we can look at the change in the total or the total of the changes. And we find whichever way we do that. Let's do it over here. Positive D cancels with negative D. We're left with negative CE. This is what we call dead weight loss, and it's a measure of the inefficiency of this market policy. And remember also that these price ceilings tend to be poorly targeted as well, but this ability to estimate what turns out to be a lower bound, because every low-valued person that got the bike instead of a high-valued person would cause even more loss than we estimate when we estimate the deadweight loss. But this gives us a figure to work with. We know just how much consumer and producer well-being, total well-being is lost. Now again, we see this fact that some consumers win because they've got a cheaper bike, but some consumers lose. That comes out in this disaggregation, which is a useful feature of this analytical tool.